I think that there was traffic was pretty bad on one of the roads, so we'll give it about 5 minutes. give it a start. So you're all very welcome to the 18th meeting of the Strategic Growth Partnership. I want to just welcome you as the newly elected mayor for Derry City and Strabane District Council. I was a previous member of this committee and partnership, so it's an absolutely honour for me to become part of it and co-chair it as an extremely important partnership. It oversees the implementation of our strategic growth plan to improve our social, economic and environmental well-being of the city and district. Never before has the concept of well-being been more important, and despite the challenges of the pandemic, we remain committed to addressing inequalities and improving our city and district's global competitiveness. During this morning's meeting, we have tried to take a focus on the economic strand of the Strategic Growth Plan, and I, along with the co-chairs, are delighted that we have Dr. Owen McGuinness, Senior Economist from the Ulster University Economic Policy Centre, to update us on the economic forecast, and also Shane Murphy, Deputy Secretary from the Department for Economy, to update us on the 10X Innovation Strategy. Fundamentally, however, we also will reach a milestone moment when we consider and approve our first review of the plan since it was produced in 2017. As you are all aware, this review is required by the community planning legislation. It also helps to ensure that the plan is reflective and relevant to the current context and the plan operates within. The revised plan outlines the progress that we have made in the delivery of this plan over the past 4 years. Despite the many challenges, we have demonstrated progress. We have achieved so much, but still have much more to do. We cannot do this alone, and it is only by working together in this strategic collaboration that this synergy happens. So thank you for your ongoing commitment to this process and the ongoing work that you are doing within the city and district to improve our quality of life. So thank you, and we'll now move to agenda item 2, which is the broadcasting statement, and it is the hybrid meeting protocol. So this meeting will be streamed live and can be viewed by the public. All members except the chair are asked to keep their microphones on mute unless invited to speak. Members who wish to speak should indicate a desire to do so by using the chat function. When invited to speak by the chair, please unmute your microphone and, where possible, switch on your video to enable being heard and seen. When finished speaking, please remember to switch the microphone to mute again. And in the event that the chair or the officer hosting the meeting identifies a failure of the remote participation facility, the chair will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed. So we'll now move to agenda item 3, which is apologies. So I'll move to Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Today we have apologies from Kenny McFarland, the co-chair, but he is capably deputised today in the role of co-chair by Martin Duffy. We also have apologies from Roisin McLaughlin from Northwest Community Network, Teresa Malloy from the Western Health and Social Care Trust, who is deputised, I believe, online by Seamus Ward. With apologies from Fiona Tegg from the PHA, Kat Healy from Outer West, who is deputised by Lisa Moore-Maguire. Also from the team, we have apologies from Colm Doherty and Una McGillian, and Martin Graham from Tourism NI. And if you'll allow me, Chair, I'll just issue a special welcome to new members who are here today. We have Richard Archibald here, who's the Director of Sport from Sport NI. It's his first meeting, so very welcome, Richard. Anna Doherty, the Interim Chief Executive from the Londonderry Chamber of Commerce as well, too. Very welcome, Anna. And Sean Beattie, who I believe is online, who is a Deputy Head of Service at the Libraries NI, who has taken over from Tricia Ward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Rachel. I would now ask if there's any declarations of interest. Anyone online, if you want to put them in the chat box? No? Okay, moving on then to agenda item 5, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. So if I could just have a proposer for accuracy. Somebody who was there.
Chair, can I just come in just to advise that on the minutes it states that Janice Scallon actually works from the Education Authority, and that's incorrect. Janice works for the Department for Education and is a director at the Department for Education. We're always very grateful to have departmental officials. So just to note that as an error in the minutes, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. That's noted. Proposer for accuracy?
I'm happy to propose Mayor Linda Watson.
Thank you, Linda. A seconder? Martin, thank you. And any matters arising?
Chair, just to advise, there was an action arising in relation to the Ulster University hosting a MASM meeting for the Strategic Growth Partnership, and that was duly held on the 25th of May and was well attended. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any other matters arising? No? Okay, thank you, members. I'll pass on to John, who is going to take the next part of the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, everyone. We're delighted to be joined again this morning, although I think it's virtual. I'm hoping that Dr. Owen McGuinness is out there in virtual land, hopefully about to give us a presentation on the spring economic forecast. And morning, Owen, good to see you.
Morning, John.
Just to put this into context, the UUEPC and Owen in particular have been with us as a partnership now since the beginning of the process. When, as you will recall, we did do an economic analysis of the various initiatives in the plan and to ensure that they would have the outcomes that we all hoped. Through our membership and association with the UUEPC, we also received this annual forecast of the macroeconomic picture, both in Northern Ireland and more specifically how we relate to it. So I'm assuming that you may have had a chance to read through the presentation prior to the meeting, and I'm now going to pass, Mayor, over to Owen to take us through the headlines. And obviously, members, if you've any queries or comments, we can pick those up after Owen's presentation. So if you're okay with that, Owen, I'll pass over to yourself.
Thanks, John, and thanks to Mayor Duffy for the introduction earlier. I'm just going to share a shortened summary, really, of what's in the pack with people. If you bear with me here, just one moment. Should come up now. So if you just give me a moment here, I'm going to take you through maybe for the next 10 minutes or so, just what we're kind of finding in the economy as we're looking at it now in June. These forecasts are a couple of months old, really have been shared back in March time, but they should still hold quite well for us. And there's a couple of changes. I'm guessing really from March up to June, probably the costs and the risks have increased over the signs of growth. Really, that's been a bit of a shift there. I think with the war in Ukraine, the cost of living crisis, the kind of the factor around inflation, tightness in the labour market. A lot of the challenges that were there are coming on the scene in March have intensified over the last number of months. So you're kind of seeing there that we still are seeing signs of growth, but probably now with more emphasis on the cost and the risks. Indeed, there's talk now of the potential of a recession at the turn of the year 2022 into 2023. And you can see that really with the growth forecasts. They're still in growth territory for 2022, much lower than that for 2023. But if you were to look back at those figures, say 2 or 3 months ago, the 2022 figures percentage growth would have been much higher than it is now. One exception perhaps to note to that, which should pay benefits to the council area, is the growth rates that are there for the Republic of Ireland. Those are still very strong, very much the kind of best in class figures when you compare it to the euro area numbers below that. I suppose one important point to make is that we still hold with the idea that the Northern Ireland economy will return to the pre-COVID levels of, in 2019, the pre-COVID levels of GVA by 2023. Probably a few months ago, we would have said that's the first half of 2023. Now we're thinking midway through next year into the latter half, but to return to those levels of growth, given the kind of the impact of the pandemic is pretty remarkable recovery. But inflation is with us now. Back at the start of the year, there was probably a lot of discussion around whether the surge in inflation and the price rises would be temporary or not. I think that debate is now fairly well settled on the idea that it's going to last, it's going to peak higher and it's going to last longer than we first thought. Indeed, these are figures from the Office for Budget Responsibility back in March, April time, and their forecast was that it wouldn't go any higher than 9%. We've now reached 9% for this year, and there is talk, the Bank of England have talk of sort of 11%. I suppose one of the key factors with inflation is that it's felt everywhere, but not felt equally everywhere. The mayor said at the start around inequality, inflation at the moment for poorer households is probably already into double-digit levels, given the kind of the emphasis on energy inflation and indeed the kind of rise in food inflation as well. So that's a thing to bear in mind. They're going to last longer than we thought, going to peak higher than we thought at the start of the year, and already being impacting very sharply on many households. And you can see the impact really of that across the economy really in terms of this year and next year. We would expect household incomes to actually fall relatively because of the impact of inflation. So one other thing, maybe a general point to make, and this is a key one, both across the north, but also in the council area in particular, and I'll come back to that, is the decline in the working age population. At the moment, we're seeing very, very tight labour market, hard to fill vacancies, and I think that's something that's going to sharpen still further really in the years to come, because you can see on the chart on the left hand side is really showing the numbers of people who are coming into the labour force. I suppose there's one potentially coming into the labour force in every year, and you can see those numbers have gone way down for 2010 to 2020 and are expected to fall still further. The census, the results that are released later in the year will give us a bit of better picture of that too. So in terms of the kind of big picture here, employment is certainly additional employment is very much on the rise. These are the figures for Northern Ireland as a whole. And we're expecting really on an upper scenario, if everything, the baseline scenario, as we normally say, is things just carrying on business as usual. An upper scenario is where additional city deals, investment, other investments, maybe under the 10X strategy that you'll hear about later. All of that goes to plan, goes better than expected. And in that case, you could be looking at a situation where the Northern Ireland economy would have 1 million, coming up close to 1 million jobs in place by 2030, 2031. So quite remarkable employment growth. If we take it more close to home, into the Derry City and Strabane area, we're expecting to see a quite strong GVA growth over the next decade, actually better than it, just above the Northern Ireland average. So the improvement that you've seen in recent years, where, with the exception of 2020, we're expecting to see that continue. And a better than average growth would mean a bit more of a convergence for the local economy with what's happening in the north more generally. In an upper scenario, again, just making that point, and with the full city deal, the strategic growth partnership being implemented in full, everything going well, we would expect that to come up by an additional 250 million, by 2030, with more to come in that case. So, much of the success will depend on the full implementation of the plans that are in front of the city at the moment. And again, the upper scenario around workplace employment, again, good strong numbers there. The big challenge, I think, in both the baseline and the upper scenario will be the availability of people and the availability of talent. Your co-chair there, Gavin Killeen, could speak a lot to that point, as could some of the other members in the partnership. Where we're expecting to see the growth, what sort of jobs we're expecting to see the growth in. So you can sort of see on our baseline, we're expecting 4,500 jobs to be created those are additional new jobs over the next while. Again, that rises to more than 7,000 in the case of the upper scenario. Their health, construction and ICT are expected to drive those jobs. And we're already, I suppose, seeing additional jobs in things like administration services. There, the AXA launch last week being a good example of that. One of the things we're expecting to see less to happen really than under COVID is the fall in retail. Retail, we still expect to fall away, but perhaps not to the same extent as we first thought. Improving labour market outcomes are there for residents as well as for workplace employment. And, you know, the review of the strategic growth plan that Rachel and colleagues have pulled together will, I think, highlight that these figures that we have seen, you know, are seeing, if you look at the claimant count numbers, also fallen away really over the last number of months. So the COVID jump has started to kind of be mitigated out again. Probably the one to draw attention to, though, is inactivity. Remains a key challenge. Remains a key challenge in every council area across the north, but in particular in the north and the west, councils to the north and the west. And the participation rates for people with caring responsibilities, for women in the household, for the disabled, those with mental or physical health conditions, are still very low right across the north. So and I presume, you know, those are going to be the focus of the IFF monies that come through to the city deal, through the work of the labour market partnership, all of that. But there are particular cohorts, there are hard to reach groups. It's not an easy thing. Often the benefit incentives are against them actually coming into the labour market. So there's a few issues there for people when they actually have to make that decision. I mentioned this before, we're in an age now at the falling working age population. So a question now not only of how we incentivize people into work, but in a sense, how do we make the places we live attractive to new people to come to, you know, live in our areas? And I think that's a significant challenge for us. So just the last thing really, you know, generally we sort of put on, this is on the slide deck that's in front of you, maybe change just a little bit some of the wording on it, but the key considerations I think remain pretty much the same. They remain similar for the council area, even with the shorter term crises that we're facing and that elected members and other members of the partnership would be looking at around the pandemic, the legacy of that, cost of living crisis, and indeed then the sort of trade conditions with the Northern Ireland Protocol. All of those, the short-term crisis, I suppose, are with us at the moment, but I'm always sort of advising that keeping balance the longer-term goals that are there in the growth part, in the growth deal and in the city deal as well. I think those are kind of critical things to keep in mind. You'll hear later on from Shane Murphy, Mayor Duffy mentioned that, and I think it'll be three words, one after another. Innovation, innovation, innovation is going to be the key word in policy and in the focus there, I think, of the city deal. Inclusive innovation is probably, you know, an additional thing that we're now looking at a bit more closely, in a sense of how we actually bring more people with us, that innovation isn't just for one particular group within society, but should be there for all of us and deliver for all of us. So I think that's another element of the innovation piece. The risks attached with COVID, we could talk about those all day around, but particularly the scarring effects in some of the most impacted sectors, I think has to be borne in mind. And the drift into early retirement that we've seen, and that has continued over the last 6 months. Labour market partnerships and the inclusive future funds as well. I think we looking at those around the employability challenges, and particular for those from particular groups that I mentioned around inactivity. The link of bringing people into work and reducing poverty, I think can't be overstressed. I think that is something we need to come back to time and again, of what the advantages are for people to be, you know, be in the labour market, be brought into the labour market, and to, you know, escape some of the traps that are there. But as I mentioned earlier, the incentives need to be right for people to do that. And I think the last point I made about attracting a new workforce, looking again about what the changing new world of hybrid working might mean for that. Are there opportunities there to attract people, you know, to come and live in the council area? It's certainly one that all 11 council areas are looking at. But given that all the Northwest has to offer, it's in a good position for attracting people in. So I'll leave it there, John, and I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you, Ewan. Thanks for that summary, and thanks for all of the other detail in the report as well. I suppose a few things that just strike me personally with regard to this is, I mean, obviously in any of these reports, there's some very sobering statistics, but there are also an incredible number of positive trends. Given all of the bleak news that's out there, we are making progress, maybe not fast enough, but it is progress. And I think, you know, as a partnership, when we commenced this journey back in 16, 17, we had no idea of the macro risks that were going to attempt to impede progress, from pandemics to issues to do with government, to cost of living crisis, to Brexit, to all of those uncertainties that have the potential always of derailing strategic progress. And currently, with the worsening cost of living crisis, that's potentially our biggest risk going forward as well. But I think, taking from your presentation, Owen, and previous presentations, the key actions and objectives of this plan are and will make the change. And so, in terms of how we face those risks, we always need, while dealing with the present issues, we always need to keep a focus on the strategic direction. And if we can advance the strategic direction, even in times of crisis, we hopefully emerge the other end of that crisis in a much more positive place. And I think that's what we've seen through the crises that we faced already. So for me, that's the key message. And I know that each of you in your organisations try to do the same, but it's a very, very important message. Are there any other comments that people want to make at this stage? Jim?
Thank you, Chair. Owen, thank you very much for your presentation. It's quite intensive too as well. And just a couple of things that, John, you've mentioned, but also that highlights the problems that we're in at the moment. You mentioned disposable income of 15,330. Now, I don't know where that figure relates to and at what period in time, but considering the problems we have at the minute with increasing fuel prices and also increasing demands on charity food outlets, and also the likely increase in child poverty, I'm wondering, is that figure reasonably accurate at this particular point in time, or is it something that has to be revised on an ongoing basis? Because obviously it's going to have an impact on the economy as a whole locally, and on the use of retail services, whether that be in restaurants and bars and a whole hospitality trade. So could you possibly comment on what I've just said? Thank you.
Certainly can. Thanks for the question. I mean, it's an annualized figure that, so I think the last time that figure was updated was, I think, the 2020 numbers. Those are, so we're a good 18 months,
Right.
Out with that, and it wouldn't, to be fair, it wouldn't take into account the surge in inflation. So yeah, I mean, I think the point I was making there was that in one of the earlier slides was that they were expecting household incomes to actually go into negative territory this year and perhaps next. So that, and that would reflect the impact of the cost of living crisis on households. So and undoubtedly, I think that's where people worry about recession, is that as you kind of erode that gross domestic household income, therefore our local services, our local retail, all of those things come on, our local construction industry, all of that comes under pressure as people have less money in their pockets to spend.
Thank you very much, John. John, could I just come back to yourself in this, because obviously it's an impact on our council area as well. And I know councillors have addressed this as best they can, and a lot of factors are outside your control. But is it something that council obviously are very much aware of and trying their best to do something to ease the pressure, other than outside intervention by government itself, which is like the £600 and other measures coming down the line? Thank you.
In terms specifically of household income? Well, I suppose on a broad level, one of the key objectives of Council's economic strategy is to raise median salaries, to raise household disposable income. That's one of the key objectives of the growth plan, is to increase the number of jobs, to decrease economic inactivity, and to raise median salary levels. So the differential between this council area and other council areas is a primary objective. So that's the kind of broad approach. In terms of what it's doing here and now, it's about keeping costs down. It's about delivering value. From a council perspective, it's striking the lowest possible rate that can be struck to ensure that we minimise impact on businesses and households, but still that balance between trying to provide services, many of which spur growth, many of which keep the businesses, restaurants, the hospitality sector busy. So it's always that balance. But council is very mindful of that issue at the moment. And certainly as we go through the summer and into the autumn, there will be a focus like no other on costs and our cost base to ensure that what council is doing is value for money. If I've addressed your question correctly, Jim. Thank you. I see Gavin Colleen looking to come in there. Gavin.
John, thank you. And Mayor, colleagues, I apologise for being late this morning. I was delayed in traffic congestion on the Victoria Road and only able to join now. And Owen, sorry, I missed the start of your presentation, but see, I've seen it on a number of different occasions and I know the flavour of it. I just like to reiterate, the challenges that we all face going forward, but also the possible opportunities as well, because we are moving from a situation of a skills shortage, to it's actually a people shortage. We don't have enough people just applying for jobs of all sorts, but yet, we do have this high level, particularly in this council area, of economic inactivity, and I would hope that going forward, through the labour market partnership, that we are able to look at some form of pilots and some form of incentives to see what we can do to try and encourage and to make it possible for people who are economically inactive to return back into the workforce. And as Owen has mentioned, that's possibly looking at flexible working for maybe younger females who struggle with childcare, but also those other people, who are currently on some form of income support, where it's a barrier for them to maybe to go to the college to study, to get a skill. We need to address that, and we need to, really look at the economically inactive, because this is where the people are. And, just to fix the job shortage, the gaps that we have for the employers at the minute, it's those people that are economically inactive. If we could get 30% of those into the workforce, it will provide significant benefit to a number of employers, and actually it in itself will create further employment, and people in work are able to earn their own money and move out of poverty rather than be reliant on the handout. So there's huge challenge ahead, and I would hope through the education and skills group that we'll start to look at various activities, within the labour market partnership, to see what we can do to try and encourage and trying to see how we can help and assist the people that are furthest removed from work at the minute to try and get back into the workplace, because that's really where the people are going to come to fill those gaps for those jobs at the minute that employers have.
Thank you, Gavin. Owen, have you anything you might want to comment in respect to that?
Yeah, I'd agree entirely with what Gavin Colleen has said there. I think one of the things when we think about household income and the point that was made earlier, the correlation between council areas in whatever part of the island we're in with higher employment rates, there's a good strong correlation between a higher employment rate for its residents and higher levels of gross domestic household income. So in other words, work certainly does pay for people, and enabling people to get into work, making it easier, reducing the barriers, reducing some of the benefit barriers, I think also as well, to allow people to get into work. And often I think one of the things to bear in mind when we're not dealing with, not with all people who are economically inactive, but for some of the groups there can be second and third attempts to actually get into work. It's not a straightforward issue that you just get into work and that's you back in the labour force. There could be 1, 2, sometimes even 3 attempts made by people to do that. So making that transition as easy as possible and as flexible as possible, I think would be the message I'd have. I think that is key.
Ewan, I think there's probably a few factors there that we're all collectively focused on at the minute. I think trying to make it as easy as possible for those who can't access the labour market is certainly a key strand of work that the skills partnership, which is a unique partnership that exists in this council area, continues to address. But also two other strands. When we're faced with potential population decline, it strikes me that as a small city with the quality of life indicators that we have, it propels us into pole position in terms of attractiveness, both to as an opportunity for those who have left to return, but also as an opportunity for those who might see this place as a much more attractive opportunity than elsewhere to relocate. We still have a tremendous value proposition in terms of house prices, in terms of office rental values, and obviously in terms of all of the other issues to do with low commute to work times and the quality of life that can be led here. So I think on three strands, we're probably collectively working to try and address that shortage of labour that everyone is facing. But it strikes me that we do have a real opportunity here to promote the opportunities of this place and try and address that through that three-stranded approach. I don't know, Owen, if you wanted to say anything around that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, John. I think, you know, every area is going to face this issue with the working age population, and it'll you know, those are those areas which are most flexible, innovative, but most of all attractive places to live will be the ones that are in, as you say, in sort of pole position there to pick up the opportunities and to bring people, you know, to live there. I think one element I would always say in this picture, sometimes it's often forgotten, is that we're trying to attract the one person who will come for the job. But I think very often we have to bear in mind that you know, people come as packages. They're kind of couples, they're young families, they're all of these sorts of things. So having opportunities there that you know, attract both sides of the couple, and you know, good schools, all of those things, good place to live, green spaces, you know, leisure activities, and all of that goes with it. You mentioned their affordable housing too. You know, if you look elsewhere on the island of Ireland or in other parts of Northern Ireland, you know, affordable housing is now one of the key issues for people's location and where they work. I mentioned there earlier about sort of remote working and hybrid working too. I think all of those throw up opportunities for the area that, you know, and as I said, particularly in a time now where labour market tightness is there in every place. I think the affordability point is a key one to stress. I think if you're kind of going with it down the attractiveness route.
Just I suppose ask Owen a question here. So at the beginning, you said the Northern Ireland, we would exceed the Northern Ireland growth rate here, and Derry expand to council area. So really, what are the factors that are driving that? Because I mean, it's interesting, it's a change from what it's been in the past. So are we strengthening, I imagine, some of the key areas, or have we strengthened it through the beginning of the application of the strategic growth plan? The second point I would raise is around female labour market participation rates, which are amongst the lowest in these islands. And how is that somewhere we should be looking for in terms of labour as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that on the first point, Michael, it is a kind of a structural and a sectoral change that you've seen in the council over the kind of recent number of years, and we're expecting that to continue on. So I suppose what I mean by that is that the growth that we're seeing in the council area is in the best sectors to be growing in, and I think the beginning of the strategic growth plan has bolstered that element of growth within the council area. We would expect, you know, that to continue on. My suspicion is that if the city deal gets fully implemented over the next number of years, that you'll actually see that accelerate. So, you know, that is a baseline where we're expecting Derry to be slightly ahead of the Northern Ireland average with the kind of city deal there in place. You know, bearing in mind that other places are going to have their growth deals, I think that can allow Derry to sort of stay well ahead. There are off growth rates elsewhere. So growing in the right sectors is key. We've begun to see that around professional services, ICT. Also, I think interestingly, growth in manufacturing that we've begun to see again in the council area. I think that's another key sector of growth. So that'd be that answer. In terms of the labour, female participation in the labour force, it's a generational issue that's a long-term change that one can see. I think there are many factors why, you know, and the skills partnership will probably be addressing this as well. There are many factors why women don't go into the workplace. One of the key ones, so I think we come back to time and again, no matter what area you're in, but particularly for those that have lower rates of participation, is around childcare. I think that's inescapable. Issue it's a fear of not being able to get childcare, a fear that the jobs won't be flexible enough to work or to be able to kind of work childcare around that, or you know, be able to get back and forward for childcare. So it's availability of spaces, it's affordability of spaces, and then it's around flexibility of the work that you're in. I think in all, if those three things can be got right, I think the female participation rates will start to head upwards. But you are right in saying that's higher in the council area than in other council areas. So, you know, I suspect getting those sort of elements of it correct will be a sort of a key factor in moving that forward.
Thanks, Owen. I suppose just picking up on that point, I suppose on the face of it, an ambition to be just above the Northern Ireland average seems like a fairly low ambition. But given that throughout our history, we've always been consistently way below the average, and to now have a clear path toward exceeding that average is probably actually very good news at this stage. So thanks for looking at that for us. Are there any other queries or comments at this point? But is there someone online there? I can't see that comment. No. Okay. Okay, Owen, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us virtually this morning. Look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully very soon.
Look forward to that. And thank you very much for having me this morning.
Thanks very much. You're welcome to stay virtually for the rest of the meeting, of course, as well.
I will, John. I hear about 10x.
Thank you.
Thank you, John and Owen, and indeed Gavin, for taking part in that section. I'll pass over to Pauline, who'll take us to item 7.
Thanks, Mayor. So we're moving to the review of the strategic growth plan. Now, the last time we met, you'll remember we were about to go through a public consultation process. That consultation has now happened, and I'll invite Rachel now to take us through the paper.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Yeah, as you rightly said, the purpose of this report is to brief members of the partnership on the outcome of the public consultation on the revised strategic growth plan and present the amended plan to you today and its associated risk register for approval. As you may recall, at our last meeting of the Strategic Growth Partnership, you approved a draft reviewed strategic growth plan, which in itself at that stage prior to February was prepared following a significant consultation and engagement process. And we agreed then, once it was presented in February, to launch it for a further consultation. So it was duly issued for a 9-week public consultation between the 14th of February and the 15th of April. We developed an online questionnaire and it was made available on our community planning website, growderrystrabane.com. And this questionnaire was in addition to the citizen space survey that we had done previously and also a stakeholder survey, which helped us in producing the content of the reviewed plan. So in this survey, residents were asked whether they agreed with the priority main actions within the plan and whether they felt that the actions within the plan met the needs of community, and if not, what would they change? We also held a number of in-person public consultation events throughout April and May throughout the city and district. And these really provided an opportunity for citizens and stakeholders to learn more about the review, the review process that we had undertaken, what amendments we had made to the plan, and to provide feedback. So the consultation events were attended by a range of stakeholders. I suppose, firstly, I know Malachi's on the call. I'd like to specifically thank the Ulster University, who attended every one of them with us, and probably could have done the presentation towards the end of the sessions themselves. We also had representation from Developing Healthy Communities, the Derg Local Growth Partnership, Waterside Neighbourhood Partnership, Curry Near Community Association, and the Spare and Growth Partnership, amongst others, who came in person to sort of talk to us about the reviewed plan. So the feedback received during those consultation events have been thematically grouped, and it is summarised in the public consultation report, which is attached at Appendix 2. We also, members, presented at a number of other stakeholder engagement events to raise awareness of the public consultation and to elicit feedback on the plan. We attended a Rights of Nature conference, which was held in the Everglades, and presented on the review. We also held a specific meeting with Zero Waste Northwest following a request. We also presented at a consultation event which was hosted by Developing Healthy Communities. And obviously we presented into council here through our Governance and Strategic Planning Committee to elicit views from councillors. So also over the course of the public consultation process, we initiated an active social media campaign to carry out, sort of publicise the consultation. And over the 9-week period, we had 66 posts over all our council social media platforms and had a reach of just over 200,000. A press release was also duly issued and featured in the local media, just again raising awareness of the consultation and detailing how to respond. We also issued correspondence to all contacts on our community planning mailing list on our database, so they got notified that way. So culminating in that, we attached Appendix 2, a comprehensive consultation report, which details the feedback received. And I suppose overall, members received, the feedback on the draft revised plan was very favourable, and a number of individuals actually acknowledged the progress that has been made in the first 4 years of the implementation of the plan. In summary, we had 18 formal public consultation responses, 14 to the online questionnaire and 5 written responses. We received a good joint organisational response from the PHA and the Western Trust. I know Seamus is on the call, so thanks for that. We also received a response from Developing Healthy Communities, Age NI, Destined, Zero Waste Northwest, Culmore Community Partnership Limited, the Forum for Ageing Better, Calvert's Cross Community Association, and also Neve Owen, GAA. Of respondents to the online questionnaire and attendees at the consultation events provided very specific editorial feedback, wording changes and things like that. So what we did is we captured those specific feedbacks into an edit log so that you could see what they had recommended and how we considered that and moved to change the plan. So that's attached at Appendix 3 for openness and transparency. So taking all this ongoing feedback, which we've been at for a long time, and engagement into consideration, we now have a reviewed strategic growth plan presented to you today for approval. And if you'll allow me, Co-Chair, I just want to reflect on some of the key changes that we have now in this plan in 2022 as compared to the plan which was originally published in 2017. The significant change that we have was to reflect the ageing population, and we now have an additional outcome, which is we have a caring society that supports people throughout their lives. This reflects obviously very strong feedback that we received from stakeholders really since 2017, that they felt that where there was a children and young people's outcome, they felt there was also a need for an older person's outcome. And this brings our outcomes to 9, which is in line with the programme for government, who also have 9 outcomes in their framework. The other key change that we have is that we have prioritised our actions. We now have 3 or 4 priority actions per outcome. And also significantly, in modernising the plan, we now include details of the innovation and regeneration projects which are featured in the City Deal and Inclusive Future Fund. The plan also now, in modernising it and reviewing and refreshing it, also includes the key policy priorities that have emerged since the original plan was published back in 2017. Now there's a focus on COVID recovery, and you'll see that the narrative in the plan has moved on to a time of progress and a time of recovery, as opposed to a time of opportunity and a time for a new story, as it was in 2017. There also is now more focus on climate resilience and green transformation, and we have aligned the outcomes to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and also the World Health Organization's 9 principles for healthy cities. The data in the plan now reflects the progress that we have made and focuses primarily on the indicators that we set to chart progress. We're also mindful that the census data is due to be published at the end of this year, and obviously that may have an impact on how the policy planning landscape is. So the focus in the data in the plan now moves to how we are progressing and how we've begun to close the gap in some of the indicators between Derry and Strabane and the rest of Northern Ireland. Owen's already spoke about our economic rate or economic inactivity rate. There's also indicators there in relation to your death rate, admission rate for alcohol and social dwelling completions, where we seem to be bucking the trend and narrowing the gap between Derry and Strabane and Northern Ireland. The challenges section has also been reviewed. And also, in terms of implementation, the focus now moves to delivery partnerships rather than outcome delivery partnerships as we had back in 2017. You'll have heard Gavin talk there about the labour market partnerships in Owen. They're new partnership structures that weren't about in 2017. Also, I know Seamus is on the call from the Trust, and we have this new integrated care system partnership which has been established from a health. So that we had to take into cognizance those new partnership structures. And also we have now featured in the plan our new rural issues group, which is very active, and our anti-poverty group is also featured. In cognizance of all this review, we also have reviewed the risk register associated with the delivery of the strategic growth plan, and it's attached at Appendix 4 for members' consideration. So, members, the recommendations before you today is that we endorse the draft consultation feedback report, which is attached at Appendix 1, and significantly today in terms of milestones, approve the revised strategic growth plan attached at Appendix 2, and then approve the updated strategic growth plan risk register attached at Appendix 4. And that really leads us up. It's a sort of a milestone moment. And looking at the bubbles on the screen then, you'll know that that moves us back on to the next cycle. So the next steps for us as a partnership is our statement of progress, which is due in autumn 2023. Again, charting progress on the indicators that we have set. And then the next review of the plan is due in 2026. So thank you, Co-Chair.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I think you've made clear the extensive engagement that has went on as part of this. This hasn't been just a desk-based exercise. There's a lot of focus groups, a lot of consultation involved, and thank you, Rachel, for that. Maybe at this point, if we could ask if anybody has any comments or anything that they want to come in to ask, perhaps. And I should say, actually, even though I have glasses on, I'm not able to see the chat at the minute, so maybe I ask my colleagues to the right to keep me right if I'm missing anybody. But maybe if anybody has any comments or anything, just to come forward. Yes, lady in the front, thank you.
Just to say well done and congratulations. I know how much hard work has gone into revising this community plan, and from my perspective, I think it's a plan that we can be really proud of, and it's been fantastic to see how the Council, Rachel and her colleagues have been so open and listening and taking on board the feedback that has come through as a result of the consultation. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Jim, thank you.
Yes, Co-Chair, I just want to acknowledge the fact that you see the rural issues now has been included in that, and being part of that and co-chair of it, I must acknowledge the great work that's been done in bringing that together, even to the point that recently under the RITS review, there was £150,000 of an amount for 1 year for the purposes of helping the rural partnerships to develop. Because they were very much in their infancy, and it also sets the scene for hopefully the same sort of financial support that has been provided for the neighbourhood renewal partnerships over the years by now the Departments of Community, to give some sort of continuity and also make sure that the urban and rural issues are very much aligned with each other and also move forward really on a tandem with each other. So I must acknowledge that and thank the council really for all their efforts in bringing that together, because it puts a real focus. And as you can see through that, both Rapid and other organisations have put an input into the review as well, which is obviously reflected in it. So thank you very much, and I welcome the review. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm assuming there's nobody coming in online. Okay, John, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair, for letting me in. Just a couple of comments. First, to thank everyone. I know Rachel's already done it, but to thank everyone for participation in the review process. I know everybody's flat out with other issues, so it's really appreciated that people took the time to do that. But also just to say that, I mean, certainly this is the first time I ever remember in this city and district that a plan has survived and delivered 4 years after it was written, and that we've actually got to the point of reviewing a plan and it's still live and it's still relevant. And I think that's a really big milestone for us in the city. I mean, we've lamented over the years that we've all gathered around plans and then the plans have sat on shelves and we haven't been able to implement them. And the fact that there is still active participation across the group, albeit today we're diminished in numbers because we're in a virtual setting, but that there's still active engagement, that we all still think that the plan is relevant, that we're all still broadly pushing in the same direction is real testament to the strength and resilience of the partnership working that goes on across the city and district. So I think there's an awful lot to be celebrated about that fact today, to be quite honest. That we've undertaken a review, that we see progress. We acknowledge there's still massive progress to be made, but that we've regrouped around a reviewed and refreshed plan. I think that's a very positive sign for the partnership. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Okay, thank you, John, for those comments. And just moving then online, Seamus Ward.
Thank you. My apologies. My camera just went off just before I came on to speak. So sorry if nobody can see me. I just want to echo what Aaron had said as well too in terms of the approach taken by the council. We did give a combined response from the PHA and ourselves, and it was quite robust. And I think it just to me and acknowledge the work that Rachel, Colm, and the wider council team have done in terms of the transparent and open co-production way that they've approached this and the kind of reflections they've taken in the response. And I suppose the updates that they've given the plan as well too, and particularly welcome the move to the focus on health inequality. So just well done everybody, and really welcome the approach that you've taken to do this.
Okay, thank you, Seamus. And moving to Caroline Lynch, please.
Thank you. I just would like to say, confirm and agree with everything that Jim has said. I've been involved in the rural community for about 20 years, and I feel this is the first time that the rural voice has been heard. And it's through great platforms, through the Spare and Local Growth Partnership Board, and also through the rural issues. So I'm delighted that the rural issues has been included in the strategic plan going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. That's really good to hear those positive comments. And just, we were chatting earlier just in terms of having a plan that's relevant and continually updated relating to changing circumstances. Obviously, after a lot of things have happened in the past 5 years. A lot of which that none of us could have ever predicted. So it's certainly good to have the opportunity to get the plan updated and relevant to today. And certainly, that's the intention going forward as well. So maybe just to go back in terms of proposing and seconding, and just to remind everybody, the paper has recommended that the partnership endorse the draft feedback report, approve the amended strategic growth plan, and approve the updated risk register as well. So could I ask for a proposer first of all, please? Jim, thank you. Okay, and a seconder, please. Thank you. I'm sorry, could you just state your name, please?
Erin McFeely.
Thank you, Pauline, and thank you, Rachel. And I would just also like to put on record my congratulations to yourself, Rachel, on the huge amount of work that went into that. And it is, as everybody has outlined, it is a live document. It has outcomes in it that are currently being delivered upon. And it's a hugely significant piece of work for the city and district. And it is a milestone moment. So I think it is good that we do mark it and recognise that today. So well done to everybody who has been involved in the review, but particularly Rachel, who has been working particularly hard on it. So well done, Rachel. I'm going to move on now and pass over to Gavin as the other co-chair, and he's online. We take item 8.
Okay, thank you, Lady Mayor. Members are well aware how innovation is one of the key drivers that is well ingrained within the strategic growth plan. It's also well embedded within all areas of our city deal. And to date we have seen significant improvement that has been made within the areas of health and life sciences, with digital and creative industries and advanced manufacturing, and also the growth recently in our fintech sector. So we have, and we can see from the numbers that Owen highlighted earlier on, the increased numbers of employment that we've seen in these areas, which has been fantastic news. The Northwest Regional College had mentioned at our last meeting that it would be worthwhile for the department to come, Department for the Economy, to come and present their 10X strategy to show the alignment that we have with the department. This is the department's strategy to grow the economy of Northern Ireland over the next 10 years, and very similar themes to our own, embedded in innovation and the same sort of areas. So I'm delighted to welcome Shane Murphy here today, the Deputy Secretary for International and Economic Relations within the Department of Economy, to brief members on the 10X strategy. So over to you, Shane.
Thank you, Gavin, and hello to everyone, and thanks for having me along. I'm probably keen to talk about the 10X vision, partly because we probably could have been doing some of this last year had COVID allowed. There was still a lot of effort and diversion of effort last year on the COVID agenda, and so we're probably not as far on as we would like to be with the 10X agenda, but it's something that we've very much picked up over the last few months again, having concluded a number of our big COVID schemes last year. Yes, innovation is at the heart of 10X, but there's also a couple of other things at the heart of 10X, and those I'll touch on those as I go along. If someone could pop on to the next slide. Those are a few quotes from famous American presidents. Again, partly to illustrate that ambition is very much within the 10X vision as well. It's not kidding itself that ambition isn't going to be hard. If it wasn't hard, it probably wouldn't be worth doing. It's also recognizing that there will be those in the standing on the sidelines that will they will want to point out and they're criticized, but those that are putting in the hard yards, it is those that are important, and it's in having that desire to improve, to be better, to be the best. It takes a lot of single-mindedness, and it also takes focus. If we skip on to the next slide, please. And we are Northern Ireland. I use the phrase, we can't be good at everything. We can't be like America or China. There's a reason why the likes of America and China come top of the medal tables in the Olympics, because they're huge countries. They can have lots of people focusing on all the different events. We're small. So we have to sort of pick and choose what we're plausibly good at and really go for it. And just as it applies in the Olympics and, I don't know, boxing, for example, it also applies in the economy as well. And that's the reference to the fear of focus. Well, we got to realize we can't be good at everything, and we'll touch on that a bit more later on. And as Gavin mentioned, innovation is at the heart of this. It's got to be at the heart of this for the sort of world we live in nowadays. But it's not the only thing driving us. And I'll come back to the other 2 points there about our people, and all of our people, they're feeling part of the benefit of moving forward in a more innovatively successful economy, and while doing that, not trashing the planet. Those are serious objectives, not afterthoughts. But I'll come back to that in a little bit later. If we sort of move on to the next slide, I'll not dwell on this too long. This is about some international comparisons and a gauge of some of the parts of the world that we might compare ourselves against. Again, these are parts of the world where countries, yes, some of them are bigger than us and all of that. Some of them might be a little smaller, but again, they're in a similar sort of boat. They're not China, they're not the USA. They have to focus on certain things in order to be successful. And so ambition and focus are two key things that you'll hear all the time within 10X. But if we move on again, and you'll see some words underlined in the next slide. And the reason why I've underlined them is that these are the sort of key parts of the vision. And you'll see the words underlined around the societal and the environmental aspects as well. And I suppose if we flick on to the next slide, these are our 3 goals. Now, these 3 goals were the 3 goals that shaped all of this. I appreciate probably, and I think some of the guys actually back in the office did this. They sort of looked back at previous strategies, and they probably could find a few words about, their greater inclusion. They could probably find a few words about, their sustainability. But it's probably hard to feel that for those closer to it, that maybe those things were, their thoughts that came late in the day, that weren't necessarily there at the outset when the policy thinking was been done. It may not be absolutely visible to those reading the document, but for those that put this together, the 3 things on screen were the 3 drivers. So it's not just about being more innovative as an economy and with their impacts in the environment and inclusion being afterthoughts. That is absolutely not the case. Those 3 things have to be there going forward for this economic vision to be successful. And they'll probably not sugarcoat it, but some of this will be challenging. There are probably parts of our sort of policy making that have never had to think too hard before about sustainability, or never had to think too hard about inclusivity. We're going to have to think very hard about it going forward. So just want to emphasize that, because if you read the document, you might not necessarily guess that. You might assume that there are no more than warm words. I just wanted to make sure that I landed that, because we are deadly serious that these are the 3 core objectives. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. So this is going to be our framework for taking forward all our work. And as I said earlier, we lost a few months last year when efforts were diverted on to various COVID schemes. So this means that this year, and we've started on this, is a big year of policy making on 10X. It won't be all the policy making on 10X, but it's the big push, you know, at the start. And yes, DFE alone won't deliver the 10X agenda, but you know, we could absolutely make a big start on it, and we absolutely need to make a big start, because part of that is about shifting the culture, making it more ambitious, and indeed also, you know, getting that culture shifted to ensure that policy making prioritizes the environmental objectives as well as the inclusivity objectives, in addition to the innovation objectives, which probably come a lot more natural to a lot of people that sort of historically work in this space. If we move on, you'll get a flavour of how the work programme set up. There's 6 work streams there, 4 of which are policy, innovation, inclusivity, and sustainability, along with technology and clusters. And I'll probably talk a bit more about that aspect today. And then there are a couple of more operational elements. One is around metrics, because we know metrics can be very influential in when you start to flesh out plans and they turn from high-level strategic objectives into objectives at the front line of delivery. That can be very important. And then the other aspect is around funding and delivery, because some of our objectives, for those to be met, we're going to have to look at different ways of doing funding, different ways of doing delivery. Some of those things might involve their conditionality of funding, linking in some of our goals, so linking in objectives around some of our goals and things like inclusivity and sustainability into funding. But also, given the way that the world is changing in funding, there's an awful lot more funding seemingly going to be coming centrally out of Whitehall. We've got to adapt to that reality as well. Okay, but if we skip on, we can skip on probably 2 slides, because all the next one does is put a circle around technology and clusters. So taking forward that 10X focus, this is a pretty key slide. There seems to be an element where over the last sort of year or so, we get a feeling that a couple of things are being skipped over within the 10X agenda. I already touched on one of those things, which is the last bullet point there, around the goals. There are 3 goals. Innovation is not the only goal. There are 2 other goals, and they are equally important, and that will drive our policy making. But the other thing that's skipped over probably a little too often for our liking, and this goes down to our probably communications and just the way people interpret things, is about technologies. And I want to really emphasize that. The technologies are the source of our competitive advantage as we take forward the 10X agenda. And so, if it's the source of your competitive advantage, we kind of don't want to skip over too readily. In fact, we don't want to skip over it at all. And so the work that we're taking forward this year will be grounded in that. And I'll come back to a bit of that later. So in terms of taking forward this work, there's 3 things that really matter. It's the technologies where we have our advantages, they're homegrown advantages. We want to exploit them. Exploitation is the next stage, and that's where we want to turn what I'm sort of terming theoretical advantage into real economic impact. And as we design policies to do that, It's not just to make parts of the economies bigger and richer. There's a big objectives around not just innovation, but inclusion and sustainability. And so I'll go into each of those in a little bit more depth if we move on. So the initial work around 10X, and I'll not go into exactly how it was done, involving matrix and so forth, but it zeroed in on a number of probably what might be described as categories of technologies, where Northern Ireland either has current strengths that are, they're up there with the best, or with a bit of effort, they could be up there with the best. So these are our advantages, and we'll be lighting those up with what might be called, the terminology here is windows of opportunities, and this is where I'll talk later about impacts at scale. But that's going to be key, that we understand which of our technological strengths line up well with big bang impacts for the economy. If we move on to the next slide, this is where we want to take those technological strengths and ensure that our industry embrace them for commercial gain, but also economic gain, and economic gain at scale. That's the priority. I'm sure there'll be some parts of the economy, that there could adopt technology and go from 0.0001 to 0.0002 or something like that, which may be impactful for that little niche, but we're absolutely prioritizing, there much bigger and much more material impacts, and we think there's absolutely scope for that. Now, the initial 10X publication did sort of shine a light on 5 areas where at that time we thought that adoption of the technologies probably would be most likely to happen, and maybe most likely to happen to scale. But we wouldn't rule out, with a bit more work, that there could be big bang impacts elsewhere. But ultimately, that is the key step. Take what I'm terming theoretical advantage, that's sitting in a university, that's in a research center, that's maybe in a small startup company or whatever, and turning that into big bang real economic impacts. And if we move on, but as I said, and I'll reiterate again, we can't forget the goal. The goal isn't just to be more innovative. That's a necessary but not sufficient success factor. It's also about being more sustainable and more inclusive. And if we move on to the next slide, that's going to be a big focus of our public policy, because that's what public policy is for, is to deliver public policy objectives. And so that may well pan out in sort of 2 broad ways. First of all, you will have public policy that's kind of skewed towards what's called here the enabling environment. This might be investment in skills, because if we have to increase the capability of a particular technology area, or if we need to have the flow of skills into an area for the sort of commercial exploitation, getting the skills rights is important. But that's a very key part of public policy, where we would want public policy objectives to shine through. But also at the other end of the spectrum, we got to think about public policy goals there too, and in the sort of more industrial policy or industrial development side as well. There will be commercial interests in companies across Northern Ireland to adopt technologies to become more productive, to become more efficient, to add more to their bottom line. So those incentives exist. They will be there. There are also public policy goals, innovation, inclusivity, and sustainability. Now, those two sets of goals won't perfectly line up, but there is an intersect, and it's that intersect where we will be much more active in terms of intervention. And that's where we can expect the intervention to come with an objective which isn't about they're making a sector big and better. It just won't be about that. There will be other objectives as well. Whether that's about, I don't know, women in STEM, whether it's about net zero commitments from an applicant. That's just a small flavour of some of the things we'll have to think about in the future, rather than perhaps the level of thought it was given to in the past. So, in summary, and if we move on to the final substantive slide, this is it all in a nutshell. We're not America, we're not China, we're not huge, we're small, but we can be good at some things, and we are good at some things. And in order to be good and competitive at them, we're going to focus on them. That doesn't mean making deliberate choices, but being very objective about it. So we're looking at our areas of capability. We're focusing in on those technologies where we do or can excel in. We're lighting those up with the opportunities that are most relevant, that are the most significant for us. Those will become the areas that we're going to focus on, that we're going to back. And as well as the economy becoming more focused on those, public policy will be more focused as well. But at every stage in that, it's not just about making their sectors bigger and better. There's two other objectives which come into this: inclusivity and sustainability. Those are too big. We are not ignoring them. They're going to be at the heart of policy making going forward, along with innovation. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take comments, thoughts, and questions. Insofar as I can answer them all, I will do my best. Thank you.
Shane, thank you very much for that. And I'll open it up now to the floor for any comments or questions. I, unlike my colleague Pauline, who was able to see everybody in the chamber and no one online, I can see everybody online, but I can't see anybody in the chamber. So maybe some of my co-chairs could maybe help if there's any hands in the chamber that we can bring in. So if there's any comments or questions at this stage, and maybe I'll kick off with one maybe at the start. Shane, I welcome the presentation. I like using innovation as a driver, with inclusivity and sustainability taken into that. And looking at our global, where we lead the globe in various areas, but really be able to take policy and research and development and making it a global impact as well. I can really see this all really working. And I see Janice has put her hand up there, and she probably has preempted my question, because obviously, in order to deliver this, we need a workforce, and a skilled population that are going to be able to operate in this area. And I just want to just ask you, where is the linkage, or have you looked at where you can link with education to ensure that our young people are coming through schools with the right talents that we need? How do we check that? How do we ensure that it's been done? And I know you mentioned metrics. I'm looking at maybe our ETI going to be involved, and we're going to ensure that we have the workforce that we'll need for the next 10 years to deliver this innovation and this growth.
Chances are I probably can't answer all of those questions to the sort of detail you'd want today, but it's probably I have another slide which would have touched on this stuff, but didn't make the cut on this particular version of the presentation. So there's, along this sort of journey, there's key interfaces, and the skills interface is absolutely key in this. We have our 10x skill strategy as well, but that's you're correct that the skill system needs to dovetail. It's actually probably somewhat easier to plan that dovetailing based on a dovetailing to technologies as opposed to a dovetailing to a sector, because their jobs in a sector can have lots of different skills. Whereas a dovetailing to have a greater emphasis on a set of technologies compared to the emphasis in the past is there is somewhat easier to plan and dovetail, at least from where I'm sitting. That looks to be the case. So that is part of our thinking. But as I said, this is a big year of policy making for us. Not all of that thinking is currently done. So I agree with your question. I think that's something we're absolutely conscious of. But in terms of getting into all the details as to exactly how it's going to work out, I can't sit here and pretend that I know without that big year of policy making taking greater shape.
Sure, thanks for that, Shane. I think, as John alluded to earlier on, the key thing is we can't have policies that sit on shelves and nothing actually happens. And I think really for this to work, I think the Department for the Economy and the Department of Education need to be hand in glove and working very, very closely together as we move forward through this. So look, I'll pass over now to Janice, and then I have Jim then to come in next once Janice is finished. So Janice, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Shane, I popped you a message there in chat. It's inevitable that when we think of the life cycle, the economy doesn't start at 16 or 19 and stop at 64, or for some of us, if you're like me, you're potentially looking at 67 or 68 or maybe 70. But yes, it's something that has, I suppose, a question that came through for me is if we think about even the next 25 years, our population now is around 1.9 million. Okay. It will rise. It rises every year by around 10,000 people. But over the next 25 years, we're going to have around 1.5 million children. So about 1.2 million of them aren't born yet. And inevitably around 200,000 children will have some form of special educational need or disability. So I'm particularly interested in the inclusive part, Shane, because when we look at the figures earlier from the strategic growth plan and we look at some of those metrics, and I was going to come in at that point, but I wanted to hear about 10x first, just to try and tie it all together. Economic inactivity is something that I think across the board we've struggled with in the north. And when I look at the proportion of children that come through our education system with special educational need, and the gap for them and for people with disabilities in general in employment, I think that's a gap that if we really focus and go back to what you said, Shane, about the window of opportunity, I think we've perhaps seen disability as an issue. I don't want to say a problem, but an issue that needs to be fixed, as opposed to a window of opportunity. And it took me back to a story being involved with groups that work with children with special educational needs and young adults with disabilities and special educational need. And a story was told about a young guy from Belfast with autism who takes a 4-foot cuddly lion to work with him everywhere he goes. It's his comfort blanket, and no one would employ him. And the BBC gave him an opportunity, and that young man built the BBC iPlayer that I'm sure most of us watch. So when I think of the opportunity that's there in terms of adults and children and young people with special educational need and disability, I think there's a massive, massive untapped potential there. There's a lot for us to do in education, and I wholeheartedly agree with your point around the joining up of us and how we prepare our children to go into living independently, working independently, contributing positively to our economy. But also, we too have been, on COVID, obviously, I don't need to rehearse the whole educational landscape around COVID and the closure of schools and all the rest, but our schools really stepped up when it came to digital technology and remote learning for our children. It was a steep learning curve for a lot of our schools, but we've really started, and I'm not sure if my Education Authority colleagues are here on the call, but the digital innovation that's now happening in our schools, and COVID was a positive contributor to that we got online very quickly. We learned, and our children learned, to use technology as education. And for a lot of our children, that worked really, really well. For some, it didn't. So I just think there's potentially other conversations which may or may not be already happening, but I think there's a big opportunity here for us in education, but also for wider society and for this partnership around focusing on the value on education and seeing that as the pathway to contributing then to the economy. I just think there's endless opportunity in all this, and I welcome your presentation, Shane. I just think the inclusion element is huge and very, very much welcome, I think, certainly from an education point of view. So thank you.
And we're not kidding about it. Maybe people did kid about it in the past with warm words, but definitely we are not kidding about it. It's how the inclusion aspect will absolutely pan out. And I'm not running that part. But a lot of those sentiments that you expressed are certainly sentiments that are here been kicked around. Certainly, I can't remember the phraseology, so you have to bear with me and forgive me if I kind of get it wrong. But you talked about sort of their perceived disability, sort of autism, Asperger's. There's often a disposition towards technology, and I'm pretty sure that has been one of those sentiments that has been someone is putting together the thread and thinking, this could actually be there an opportunity, as you put it, in a more technological age, to give folks both a better chance in life, and potentially also to give some of our industry of the future, there some really talented and capable people, if if eyes were open enough to seeing past the 3-foot cuddly toy that, as you talked about, or the equivalent that others will have. And as someone who has had a son as a kid who took their blanket round in a mini shopping cart, I can kind of relate to some of that, but I'll not go into any more on that. But yeah, so key landing point for this for me, and by the sounds of it, probably the message has got across. We are not kidding about inclusion and sustainability. I appreciate that when you look back and read strategies of the past, you probably find a few words which hint at inclusivity, or you'll find a few words that touch a bit on sustainability. And you read this one and you see those words and you might think it's just the same thing again. I appreciate that is a possible interpretation, if not a likely interpretation. But to be clear, it was those three things that this thing started off at the conception level. They were add-ons. So, yes, there will be learning for us, and I'm sure we won't all get it right immediately, but we are deadly serious that, if we're going to have a better economy, we just can't have people, or loads of people been outside that and unconnected to it.
Yeah, I tend to agree as well. Like I was at the Northwest Regional College graduation yesterday, and the amount of stories from young people coming from those exact backgrounds and how, they have done some tremendous work within the college and have gone into the world of work and are making a significant contribution. So it's definitely very welcomed. Jim, Do you have a question for Shane?
Yeah, thank you again. I hadn't intended to comment on this, but I think it's warranted based on what Janice has said there and your latter comment there, Kevin. SEN, being a member of Board of Governors, this is a big concern now within the education sector, particularly within primary schools. There's been a huge increase in the number of statemented children coming into primary schools. And it's now recognised that other than have nurture units, we need to have streamed resources and support centres, because there's a huge mixture of children with special needs, from simple behavioural problems right through to autism and medical conditions of that nature. The impact of that long term, it will impact on the primary, not only the primary sector, but also in the secondary sector and right through into, obviously, universities. And the main thing coming out there is to deal with the capacity or the ability of these children to deal with mainstream education, and not try to force them into a corral where they need to fit within mainstream education. The problem then is the workforce at the end of the day, and this really goes back to yourself, Shane, on your report. This is going to have an impact upon the capacity of those type of people to deal with certain aspects of employment. And the strategy which currently exists, it seems to be that we need to fit these people into employment, rather than get employment issues to fit their capacity to deal with. So I just wanted to go off the side and say that. So Shane, to go back to your own report there, I just hope this is not another 10-year strategy that will end up being put on the shelf and reviewed in 10 years' time. I hope that that's not the case. And I'll give you one example of that. In the late 90s, I was business development manager of an innovation centre, and I ran in conjunction with the council and other partners locally a cluster programme which involved 5 European countries. It was a €3 million programme. And one of the things that came out of that was the fact that the cluster concept needs to be explained in detail, because getting companies to cluster together or cooperate with each other raises the question of intercompany competition and the likelihood that some aspects of certain company functions might be put at a disadvantage. So that brings me back to the technology, or the words that you're using within your report, and I think they need to be clarified. Let me take sustainability, for example. Sustainability, from an education point of view now, it's looked upon, it's not sustainable because we can't afford it. But coming up in this session now is a people and place review. And on that, there's something mentioned about having a can-do attitude. And that means thinking outside the box. Rather than looking at something in simple form, he says we can't afford it because it's in deficit, and therefore we need to close it down, like the rural schools. The consequence of that is you do away with a facility that is doing great work in particular areas. And we need to ensure that when we're looking at sustainability, we're looking beyond the fact that it's a financial reason. We're looking at doing something different, as you've mentioned, and doing something in a way which is outside the box and makes us better, but also trying to sustain our facilities rather than close them down. And that goes right across the whole spectrum of education and the economy.
Can I just come in there, because I think I need to
sure, go ahead, Shane.
And sustainability is environmental sustainability. It's our commitment to net zero. So just I think there's potential for a bit of confusion there. So just to be clear, sustainability is a reference to decarbonisation and our commitments to having net zero or net carbon economy. I think the date is 2050, with various milestones baked into legislation before that. Off the top of my head, the first of those milestones being 2030. So potential for a bit of confusion there around terminology, and I just wanted to try and clear that up at this stage. That's probably a pointer for future communication on this, that I need to be crystal clear on that.
Thanks for that, Shane, but I think it was back to the point in your report. You need to clarify what is sustainability. Other people get the wrong impression. It might be about recycling or other functionality. And I think it's important to understand that concept. Otherwise, it's misinterpreted. The other thing about innovation, again, back to your use of terminology, innovation is two aspects to it, both product and process innovation. And to me, to engage with the department at the level that you're at, to deliver aspects of your program over the next 10 years, we need to understand that it goes beyond the fact that it's a process which can be involved in at a community level as well, and understanding what aspect of that. So again, explanation of some of the terms that you're using would be very, very helpful indeed when it comes to looking at it at a local level and looking at it at a community level. Outside that, I must congratulate you on it, and thank you very much for coming here, for doing your presentation. And I just hopefully those couple of comments might help in the future in terms of delivering your program. Thank you.
Okay, Jim, thanks for that. I have John Kelpie next. Janice, you have your hand up. Are you coming back in and maybe a couple of comments that Jim made there, which are not really relevant to the 10X strategy and are maybe work for another day?
Yes, it's really just, I'm happy to come back to that in a further point. It's not, I know the difference between sustainable schools and sustainability as outlined in 10X economy, but I welcome the comment around thinking outside the box in terms of school sustainability, because, you know, I need to say, I need to address that, you know, where we have small areas, where we have very, very small schools, I really welcome thinking outside the box about how to sustain provision in the area. Rather than 3 schools, we could have 1 which delivers for all children in an area, rather than sustain 3 schools which aren't providing what we would hope would be provided for children. So I think I really do welcome the comment about thinking outside the box. It's very, very important and something we're looking into. So.
Yeah, I think the key thing, I think, for all of us, you know, from education right through to the delivery of the 10X strategy is there needs to be a level of behavioural change that needs to happen, you know, in society as to how we look at our education system and how we think. And that goes, you know, from teaching right through to parents and careers advice and all that good stuff that's included. And we can talk, Janice, in the future about the review of education. But I'll bring John in now. John Kelpie.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And Shane, thanks very much for your presentation and taking the time today. Just on the point of moving strategy into implementation, I mean, here in this city and right across a number of council areas now, we have a range of world-class innovation projects, 3 in particular through our study deal process, but a range of others through Northwest Regional College, for example, the Dial project and other innovation projects in the city and district. So there's a really good suite of huge potential in terms of the innovation projects that we're moving on here at the moment. And we're actually turning strategy here into delivery and implementation. We're very encouraged by the support that we're currently receiving from your colleagues in DFE and indeed in Invest in moving these projects through the business case process. But I do think there's a real opportunity for the department to augment that work, to take a look in depth at the potential of these projects and to come up with an action plan that the department and Invest will undertake to ensure that these projects reach their full potential. I mean, effectively, these projects are delivering on this strategy. And I think we all, both in local government, the colleges, the universities, and the department, now need to see these opportunities and seize the potential of them at this minute in time and actually come up with a suite of actions that will supercharge their potential and turn this policy and this strategy into real, inclusive, sustainable jobs for the economy. So I think you're at a unique opportunity here where the policy and the strategy exists concurrently with the innovation projects emerging. And I think there is that unique chance right now to turn this into action. But my concern is that we collectively need to do that. And it's not a case of the universities and the cities advancing these and the department in passive support. The department and Invest and the government agencies need to be in active support and move now from strategy into active implementation and actions to deliver on your policy objectives. And I wondered if you could comment in respect of that, please, Shane.
Well, I don't know all the detail of the city deal projects. It's very clear that for that work stream, that city deals is highly influential in the plans for making the innovation aspect of 10X impactful. But your worry around turning their strategies published on websites or set on a shelf, they're into reality is it genuine worry? It's something that we worry about as well, and something that we have thought about. Frankly, there were some nice strategies in the past. You dust off quite a few of them. Probably the one common feeling between them all was they were never really properly implemented or implemented at all. And something always came along to distract, and if enough things came along to distract, they were forgotten about. So there is a very conscious effort within the department that this is something we want to turn into reality and back up with action. Some of that action will involve tough choices given the public spending environment, no doubt, but we still got to make those choices and take those actions. Look, would I sit here today and say, there's absolutely no danger whatsoever that that implementation won't happen or won't fully happen? I wouldn't say that. At this stage of the 10X evolution, we're not at an irrevocable stage. It's really important we get to that irrevocable, no going back type stage, but we're not there yet. This is why it's important, and why we did worry about their diversion on the COVID grant schemes costing some time. It's one of the reasons why we're so keen that the policy making this year happens at maximum scale, that delivers impact, because for implementation to happen in the way we'd like it to happen, we need a bit of momentum. And so we really see this as a crucial year to making this different to previous strategies, i.e. actually getting something up and running and implementing. So your sentiment is correct. It's a sentiment we worry about. It's a sentiment we're consciously thinking of. And the more we all can do to help give this a bit of momentum, this could be very helpful in ensuring that this time the strategy gets off the shelf and into action.
Okay, Shane, thank you for that. I don't think there's any other questions. I'm sort of conscious of time as well, running along. Shane, thank you for that. That's been a very worthwhile presentation. I think we're very happy with a lot of the content that you have within it. Obviously, the challenges in the delivery, and I think we're probably, look at our global competitiveness and where we maybe lead the world. We probably lead the world in the production of policies. What we now need to do is lead the world in the delivery of those policies, and particularly in the delivery of this policy and those other policies that are in place this year. And we wish you well in that regard. As John has said, this council area has, we're an exemplar over the last number of years in what we've done. We hope to build and grow on that, and we see what we're doing within our strategic growth plan dovetailing quite well with what's contained within your 10X strategy. We look forward to working and with you going forward and hopefully on our joint success. So thank you very much for coming along today, and I'm sure members were very appreciative of your presentation. I'd like to hand over to my co-chair, Martin Duffy, to go into item number 9.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Mayor, if you don't mind, before I move to this, can I just echo Jim's comments and Caroline's comments in relation to the funding and the establishment of the Rural Issues Group? This has made a significant difference to rural areas and will continue to do that so as we move forward. So thanks for that. Folks, we are now going to move on to the Department of Communities. As you know, they have initiated a review of the People in Place strategy. The department are keen to have this a co-designed process, and later on we're going to be looking for nominations from rural areas and the statutory sector. But before that, we're going to have a presentation from Nicola Craig. Nicola, most of us will know from her involvement in the partnership in the past. So thank you, Nicola. I'll just pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Martin. And thank you, obviously, co-chairs and members today for the opportunity to come along and give you a wee bit of an update here. So we could maybe just go on to the first slide there, please. So, as Martin has said, the purpose today really was just to bring people up to date on our plans for the review, but also specifically to ask for nominations from yourselves or for those you may know who would maybe wish to be involved in a wee bit more detail in the review itself. So most of you, I'm sure, if not all, will be well aware of the People in Place strategy. It is the underpinning strategy for the Neighbourhood Renewal Programme, which again, all of you will be well aware of. And, you know, our own minister, going back to 2020, and the COVID theme is probably a recurring one here, announced a review of it. Obviously, that hasn't progressed as quickly as we would have liked due to COVID, but we're really keen now to push ahead, and I suppose that's really the purpose of today. So could we just move on to the next slide? So I suppose I was particularly struck this morning by probably all of the items that were in the agenda and the relevance here. So I suppose, you know, why are we actually doing this review? So the original People in Place strategy was launched in 2003, so that is nearly 20 years ago. And the landscape has obviously changed significantly there. And there's an awful lot of issues today which probably weren't there at that point, and an awful lot of issues that are still here today that were there at that point. But particularly, I think, you know, the reference to the 10X strategy, the issue around inclusivity, around growth, Owen's presentation on economic inactivity, all of those issues can't be solved unless basically we are able to address the problems that still exist in our society around poverty and deprivation, and the impact that has on people being able to actually contribute, you know, and to be able to access those well-paid jobs that we hope will be created, and to be able to, you know, to deal with the issues around, you know, employment and education that are there. So I think this is, you know, it was I think, you know, just demonstrated to me the importance and how connected all of these issues are. You know, we don't just tackle one thing in isolation, and if we don't tackle some of these issues that are still there in our communities, then, you know, the opportunities for economic growth are actually extremely limited. As well as that, you know, we have the anti-poverty strategy, the draft anti-poverty strategy, I should say, which again, you know, ideally that would have been already agreed by now, which creates, you know, a good platform for us to move forward in relation to People in Place review. But again, you know, that's about how do we tackle these issues that are still systemic in communities throughout the north, and also obviously here in Derry and Strabane. But also again, you know, you've done a lot of work, I know, within council around anti-poverty as well. So again, that's another issue that's there that we're really keen to, you know, to key into. So we could just move on to the next slide. So really then, you know, what are we actually trying to achieve here? And as I say, what we're wanting to do is really to say, you know, sorry, I'm trying to flick on my own slides here because the flipping thing had went off whenever I was talking there. So our aim really, as I say, is to review the people in place strategy and, you know, to come up with a new approach to that. So as Martin has mentioned here, the point is to do this in a co-design way, and that's really important. And I know, again, a number of people will be really familiar with, you know, the fact that, you know, lots of things are done in a co-design fashion, and it's a phraseology which is used a lot. But really, from our point of view, you know, within the department, we do not have the knowledge of that you have as working, particularly those of you who are working on the ground and with communities, about what are the issues that face people and how should they be best tackled. So really harnessing that, you know, that approach, that expertise, that knowledge that's there in an opportunity to bring everybody together is really, really important. So that is, you know, our key issue that we want to take forward to make sure that this is inclusive. So, you know, that the process is inclusive and that the outcome is inclusive in terms of how we tackle issues. And I suppose that's maybe a good point just to mention one of the key things. And I know that Martin in particular and Jim, you've alluded to rural issues as well during the meeting. The current strategy, as you will be well aware, is an urban-based strategy. There's no presumption that the new strategy would be an urban-based strategy. It's about tackling need that's there within our places and within our people. So, you know, it would be about tackling that need wherever it is. So, you know, that focus on urban is not necessarily going to be something that will be carried through to a new strategy. And I think that's important because, you're well aware of the rural issues, and I think it is something that, you know, has come to the fore and that we need to address. So I think that is important just to mention that. So as I say, our plan then is to have local co-design groups. So there'll be one in each council area, so one for the Derry and Strabane area. As well as that, we would also have a couple of other approaches, including a regional group, which would be focused more on bringing in those issues around maybe best practice, around academic input that we could have. And again, would be really grateful for any colleagues who are on the call here, you know, who may have an interest in contributing to that, who may have, some views and ideas on different ways of doing things. So we'd be really keen to pick that up as well. We also are very alert to the fact that a lot of the success of people in place, the new people in place, depends really on government departments in particular and working more collaboratively and coherently together. And that's a common theme which you'll be well aware of. It's run through a number of different strategies for a number of different years. If we can, manage to work better in a more collaborative fashion with all our partners, then I think we will have a better approach. So we're very focused on that is something that's really important. So we are taking that forward with a joint departmental group to look at how we can actually maybe work better and more collaboratively together to deliver better for people on the ground. So that's only at a very early stage. We're really keen to obviously incorporate those discussions with the co-design groups, and we would aim to do that over the coming months. That really is, as I say, still at a very early stage yet. So there's nothing really very practical I can tell you about it, but we are very alert to the fact that if we can't manage to do that, our opportunity to really deliver for people on the ground is much diminished. So it's really a key issue. Can we just go on to the next slide? So just specifically then for the Derry and Strabane Council area, we have already sought representation from the neighbourhood renewal partnerships. And obviously they are based in the urban areas. And the Minister was very keen, obviously, that our neighbourhood renewal partnerships should be involved in this, and they are vital to its success. They have a lot of skills and knowledge, and they're very familiar with what is happening in their communities. But it's not just about, neighbourhood renewal as it is today. This is about looking at how we can tackle the issues better. And to do that, we need everybody's voices in the room, and most particularly neighbourhood renewal, also very importantly, those who maybe haven't been involved in neighbourhood renewal either because of their geographic location, maybe they're located in a rural area, or potentially because neighbourhood renewal hasn't really been a programme that has brought other groups into its scope for a long number of years. So there's also organisations that maybe sit outside that neighbourhood renewal structure who we're really keen to have involved. And that's part, as I say, of our ask today, is really to try and identify organisations, groups who would like to be involved and who would like to contribute to the discussion. And obviously, you know, again, we'd be really keen to have our statutory agencies here. You know, Seamus and our other colleagues from the Trust have been really helpful throughout the whole process and have always been involved in neighbourhood renewal as the current programme. So we're really keen to link in with that health, housing executive, education, all of our statutory partners who again have a lot to contribute here. And as well as that, you know, our council colleagues, because one of the key things, particularly around the Derry and Strabane area, but obviously more generally, is the strength of the partnerships that are already existing here. So it is not our intention at all to create new structures or to duplicate the structures that are there. We've already got excellent structures, as I say, particularly in the Derry and Strabane area. So we're really keen to link into those and to use them. And I think one of the issues that it faces is probably in a number of government departments and a number of programmes is we have a terrible tendency to try and create new structures and new approaches every time we want to do something else, when in actual fact the structures and the approaches are most often already there and we just need to use them. So we're really keen to do that, and as I say, that's why we're so keen to work with our council colleagues as well in terms of joining up that approach, so that we don't end up with duplication and nugatory work for people whether, you know, on a practical basis coming along to a lot of different meetings whenever basically we all talk about the same thing at all of those meetings. So if we could just go on to the next slide, please. So that's just a bit of a visual representation of the structures that we're proposing. So as I say at the top there, with our locality co-design groups, there's one in each council area. And we've had a number of meetings of those groups so far. We would hope to have one within the Derry and Strabane area towards the end of the month. I think the 28th is our date at the moment. So we'd be hoping to have everybody along to have the discussion around taking the review forward on the 20th to kick the process off. So we've also got a number of other groups here that have mentioned the joint departmental group and our advisory group. I'll not go into detail on the others. We're proposing having a bit of a shared learning group just because we have 11 groups. We'd like to offer an opportunity for people to share their experiences and learning there. But that's something we'll go into more with those who are involved in the group. What I would like to mention is just the interest groups. We are very aware that, you know, no matter what we do, obviously the co-design group itself is going to be relatively small. There's a lot of other groups throughout the city and district, you know, who have an interest, who maybe, you know, would like to be involved. So we'd be really keen to hear their voices, to include them. So again, you know, if there's any particular groups that you're aware of, we'd be really keen, you know, to know about that and to be able to include their voice and their views in the review process. So if we could just go on to the next one. So again, this is just really a bit of a timeline, just to give you a bit of an idea of, you know, how long we're hopefully going to take to do this. So at the moment, as I say, we've kicked off the local co-design groups in a few areas, and we would hope to have the first meeting of all of those done by the end of sort of June, early July. And we would hope to have a draft strategy prepared by sort of December, January time. The draft strategy will be very much prepared by the co-design groups. So it won't be that we'll have co-design groups and then we'll go off and write a strategy separately. The whole approach around co-design is to ensure that people are able to contribute to that strategy and that the strategy is built from the ground up. It will then obviously go into the department, and ultimately the decisions on it will be made by the minister and ultimately the executive. But at that first point, we have a commitment to making sure that what we put to Minister reflects the views of our co-design groups. So, as I say, draft strategy, hopefully, you know, December, January period. We would then hope that, you know, it would go to our own minister, it'll go to the executive, it'll go through its normal process of consultation with the aim of having a new strategy in place by the sort of autumn time of 23. And in the interim period, we're not going to stop, and we would hope to have our co-design groups still established at that point, because Minister was very keen, and I think it's a very, you know, it's essential really to say that a strategy is only, you know, a document that has lots of words in it. We also need something that actually turns it into reality. And to be honest, I think that is often, you know, where we maybe don't do as well as we should within government, in that we are good at the strategy bit of it, but not necessarily at the implementation bit of it. So we're very keen to spend some time, hopefully between January and sort of the summertime of next year, looking at how we turn the strategy into reality. And that is where there is opportunity for difference at each area. The strategy will obviously be the strategy, one strategy for the whole of the North, but the implementation plan will have the opportunity, hopefully, to flex and to have a reflection of the difference in each area, because obviously Belfast is not going to look exactly the same as Fermanagh. Derry is not going to look like exactly like Lisburn and Castlereagh. There's differences there, and we want to reflect that. So that hopefully will be the opportunity to do that. So we would like to think that we would be transitioning to a new approach from in and around maybe January 24. So the current, for those of you who are involved in neighbourhood renewal currently, there wouldn't be any anticipated changes this year to the programme as it stands. Potentially not for the following year either. Obviously, that will be the decision of Minister, and you know, at this point in time, we're not quite sure, obviously, in terms of finance and so on, what will happen. But we would anticipate that we would start to transition to the new approach early from 24 onwards, with probably the majority of that happening in the new financial year. And again, we would be very keen to work up how that's going to happen. It will be a change, and those groups who are already involved in neighbourhood renewal, you know, we want to work with them as to how this transition will happen. It certainly won't be a big bang, more probably of an evolutionary type approach. So that's broadly speaking the time frame. So as I say, really today then what I was keen to do, as I say, was just to bring people up to date, and then to ask for nominations to be made. Probably to Rachel maybe would probably be the handiest way, but we can certainly drop out a note again on Monday, just bringing people, you know, up to date with what we've said. We have nominations from the 5 urban-based growth partnerships, but we don't have any currently from the 3 rural local partnerships. So we'd be really keen to get representation from those groups. We're open to numbers, but probably around 3 would be ideal. We'd be also keen for those statutory colleagues who would like to be involved to put their names forward. And again, any other groups, wider community and voluntary sector organisations who perhaps, you know, would like to be involved, who would like to come along, would like to contribute to, would be very welcome. And obviously, again, would be keen for them to put their names forward. I should say, of course, that, you know, this isn't, you know, if you aren't able to participate in the co-design group, or you know, it's not something that you feel you would want to do, there will be other opportunities to contribute. You know, it's not a one or nothing approach. There'll be opportunities to contribute online. There'll be opportunities to contribute, you know, via Zoom or by us meeting with you. You know, we're very keen to get that, you know, wide range of voices. So there will be opportunities, as I say, if for whatever reason participating in the co-design group isn't something that you're either able to do or wanting to do. So as I say, if you could maybe think about nominations, would be really grateful. And as I say, would really love to see people there on the 28th of June. And obviously we'll send out all the details and so on that beforehand. So thank you very much, Martin.
Okay, thank you, Nicola, for your presentation. It was really useful, and I suppose from a rural point of view, we're delighted that it's widening beyond the whole neighbourhood renewal areas. You know, I think that's one thing that COVID did show, that there was a huge gap between sort of rural and urban areas. So I think this is a good opportunity to get the rural areas involved. Before I move to nominations, is there anybody has any questions for Nicola? Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair. Nicola, thanks very much for the presentation. I know it's aspirational. Just a couple of things. First of all, I do chair a rural partnership, RAPID, and I'm also co-chairing the Rural Issues Group at present. And probably some of my colleagues that have joined this meeting will make the same point. But for years, we have been arguing with the Department, well, now the Department of Communities, for financial resources to support, particularly now, the 3 rural partnerships that's been set up under the one plan. And they all that creates a problem because it's not aligned with the neighbourhood renewal partnerships where they have core funding through DFC. Now, I must acknowledge the council has recently, under their RITS review this year, allocated £150,000 to address that. But I do not see the Department of Communities coming forth as to the longer term strategy to continue a funding mechanism similar to what exists under the neighbourhood renewal partnerships. And if that doesn't happen, then the problem is we're going to be left in the same scenario that DFC can fund projects and initiatives in an urban area. In fact, they're not doing the same comparatively with the rural area. You also talked about co-design there, and I welcome that, because our experience in developing the old one plan, as we'd say, was coming up with national programs and looking to fit those programs into local needs. And therefore, there definitely needs to be flexibility in terms of how this co-design approach is finalised and comes into fruition. I also note that you have 4 groups: regional, learning, interest, and joint department groups. That's a big ask, considering the availability of individuals to, in fact, engage in this process. And I'm wondering how you intend to support that on an admin basis and gather the information as necessary. Are you going to try and impose this upon council to do, when in fact the department itself has not even attempted to fund the support mechanisms financially within the rural areas over years? And that's going to be an important factor, because you won't be able to gather the discussions within these meetings and the minutes of meetings without some sort of admin resource to do that. And because it's going to be co-design at the local level built up, you're not going to be taking a co-design policy from another area and try and impose it, or from a national area. The other thing too was we've just completed a very successful rural development programme with the Department of Agriculture that was led by the council here at Ministry, and that's been very, very successful. We're waiting for the next stage coming down from that. The problem with that at the minute, the proposal to deliver on that again is slightly changing, in the sense that they're looking for wider groups to come into play. And that's going to have a big strain again on the availability of people who are involved in quite a range of rural groups to put time and effort into another range of groups from the rural area. So those are 2 areas I think is going to have issues as we go down the road here in this. And I would welcome your comments. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. I suppose in relation to the rural aspect, that's something that, has long been, discussed and remains an issue. And I suppose that's, as I was saying, one of the points of the review. So people in place as it stands is an urban strategy. But, I think that we're all aware, that the issues that face places and communities, aren't necessarily only urban based. So the review will look at those issues precisely as you're saying. How do we best deal with the issues around poverty and deprivation, no matter where they are, whether they're rural based or urban based? How we do it might differ slightly, obviously, because again, that's down to the importance of reflecting place and the needs of local communities. But, very much those issues that you're mentioning around support for rural areas and how we deal with the issues will be part of the review and part of the discussion. And certainly, in terms of speaking to other departments, we have a very close connection with DAERA, and, we'll be continuing those conversations. And as I say, we will reflect those back and we will include those with the local co-design groups, but probably just maybe slightly later in the year. So very much take on board what you're saying about rural, and as I say, we're keen to have that discussion. In terms of the co-design, as I've said, we're really keen to make sure that it is co-design, and that's why we really welcome people's input here. It's the expertise that's on the ground that'll be vital to do that. So, we're really committed to making it a true co-design approach. But on that basis, I do recognise, and I accept that that's probably quite a cluttered slide, and it looks like there's a lot of groups going on there. We wouldn't anticipate, obviously, the same people being involved in all of them. But the one thing that is to say, that we're really grateful, particularly to Council here, is that there is very good structures in Derry and Strabane, and we're keen to use those. So I very much, recognise your point about, number of people, and you end up going along to 5 different groups, and you think, why is there 5 groups? We could have done this in one. So we're really keen to do that. So, if there is an opportunity to, to do a meeting that, joined up with another type of meeting, or to take information from one particular discussion and reflect it in another, we'd be keen to do that. I'm sure Rachel and John will be very glad to hear that we're not intending for Council to have to do, that this particular work in terms of the admin. We completely recognise that it's the responsibility of the department. We're keen to work with our partners, but in no way to burden them with work which should legitimately rest with the department. So, we will obviously, make sure that the administration and so on of that is handled within the department. But as I say, we're very grateful for the cooperation and the collaboration of our partners. But I hope, Jim, that, you'll be able to participate in the co-design, and, this is something that we can have maybe a discussion, further discussion in that actual group as well.
Thank you, Nicola. Much appreciated. Hope to talk to you again in the future when you've all this sorted out. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Nicola. I'm going to bring Caroline Lynch on now.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Nicola. I agree with everything Martin and Jim has said previously, and we are delighted, absolutely delighted to hear that the rural groups are going to be part of that consultation, and that we've been included for the first time. So that's excellent news. Also to say, I hope that there will be at those discussions that access to services will be sort of treated, almost equal to deprivation, because access to services is a huge problem out here in the rural areas. In terms of poverty, like access to the food banks, health and wellbeing, educational programs. So the access to services is vitally important, and I would like to maybe think that can become part of the discussions of the co-design group that's going to be set up. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Caroline. Is any other questions? I'm a bit like Pauline, I can't see the screen that well either. I would need the optician to give me those wee glasses. Hey, can you see better now?
Martin Aiden, Harkins, Strabane, could I come on there, please?
Yep.
I just want to welcome the setting up of the co-design team. I want to applaud Nicola and the DFC Communities Minister for initiating this. I'm delighted that the rural communities are being involved, and as you know yourself from working during the COVID process, we work very well together in terms of Sperrin and Derrick and Strabane. So the very fact that rural groups are now being included in this is very welcome. I've already been nominated on behalf of the Strabane Partnership along with 2 other members to be on the co-design group. So that immediately will rule me out from coming on here. But I do welcome the fact that the rural communities are coming on board, and applaud DFC for actually initiating this review, which is badly needed. And the problem that Jim pointed out earlier on is that when neighbourhood renewal was set up almost 20 years ago, all the departments were supposed to buy into it. The only people that bought into it were DSD and then DFC. So we need all other departments buying in, just like everything else we heard about today. Unless everybody is working together, a united front, we won't go anywhere with that. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Aidan. Seamus Ward.
Chair and Nicola, thank you for the presentation. I have to say, I welcome what everybody else has said in terms of the rural participation. I think it's been muted for a long time now. My question, Nicola, is just on the thought process on the engagement exercise. Look, some of us have a regional remit ourselves. Fiona Takey isn't here in the PHA, probably Dara from Dara Chissy. I'm just wondering if there's any additional thoughts on how we could be engaged, because I'm presuming that this request will come through from Manum with this council and Causeway Coast and Glens as well. And you may have the threat of seeing my face at many meetings, which I'm sure you don't want to do, Nicola. So I'm just wondering, has there been any other thought about how we can engage with those with a regional remit, and we're not asked to run the many localized engagements, saying probably what will be the same thing and the same people.
Thanks, Seamus. And of course, I would love to see you at every single one. You know that. I suppose I'm hesitating here because, what you're saying is an issue that has been raised by a number of other agencies. And I suppose there's 2 ways of looking at this, Seamus, as you know. Obviously, we'd be keen to have all our statutory partners involved at all of the co-design groups, because I think you do bring a very valuable viewpoint to it. However, we do recognise days, which is, between now and sort of December, January time, you're likely to have similar comments. Your comments are probably going to be the same no matter what co-design group we're talking about, because it is around a strategy development. Your views and thoughts on the implementation stage may vary, because that will be much more focused on delivering for the local area. So we are more than happy to chat about, what is maybe the most sensible approach for yourselves and other regional partners that, maybe you prefer to perhaps attend one in your, in your area. So maybe Derry and Strabane for sake of argument, and provide your input at that point. So happy to have that conversation, to minimise that burden on yourselves.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Seamus, for that. I don't think we've any more questions now. Oh, sorry, Jim's still going to come back in again.
Just a point of information. Nicola, I'm sure you're aware there is a Rural Needs Act which places a requirement on statutory organisations to engage when they develop strategies and policies and so forth to take account of rural needs. Do you concur?
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. The Rural Needs Act is obviously very important, and it's one of the issues. To be honest, it's part of the changing landscape. So that wasn't there 20 years ago. Whenever neighbourhood renewal, People in Place was initiated as an urban programme, maybe if it had been, that mightn't have been the case. Who can tell? But certainly, the requirements of it and the needs. More importantly, not just the legislation, but the clear need to address issues in rural areas is, something that we're very aware of, and as I say, that we're very keen to ensure is part of the review process.
Thanks, Nicola. I'm going to bring in John here now.
Thank you, Co-Chair, and thanks, Nicola, for that presentation. It's great to see that review coming forward after the delay, obviously due to COVID. Just a couple of points. If there are any nominations that people wish to make or discuss with colleagues and then subsequently make, we'd be happy to channel those through, at least I think we would, through Rachel, if that's okay, to yourself, Nicola. Just to reinforce the point you've made yourself about the structures that exist locally here in Derry and Strabane, the place here, we've looked at the place in its entirety and have moved away, I think, from a binary position of urban-rural into looking at each of the places within our district contributing to the strategic direction of the place as a whole. And so certainly looking at the, back to that word, coterminosity, if you like, of any review with the community planning structures that have been set up and are proving effective in this area at local level, and cognizance of that would be very important. And then maybe a little more difficult, and not meaning to be politically controversial, but again, as a council, we look at this place as being a cross-border location. It's not one that exists as the administrative area only of Derry City and Strabane District Council. And to some extent, and Caroline was talking about the provision of services, if we continue to have a conversation about the viability of services based on only half of the place, then the viability of the services will never be proven. And so we've had to look at a wider geography at times in order to ensure that we can deliver services here for the totality of the population. So I know it's probably well beyond the remit of the policy, but I think in looking specifically at Derry and Strabane, there has to be some recognition of the fact that the place is a cross-border geography. This partnership certainly relates to its corresponding partnership in Donegal, and we ensure that strategically we work together to deliver on the corporate objectives, the big strategic, big ticket items. So I think there has to be some reference to that, albeit I understand that it's restricted in terms of policy nature, but the uniqueness of this area needs to come through in that review if possible. Thank you, Chair.
Nicola, have you got any response or?
Yes, thanks, Martin. I think, completely agree, John. And I suppose what I would say here is that, Derry and Strabane, probably like other border counties, is a unique position. And again, I think we'd be really keen to take learning from probably the work that you within council have done over a number of different issues around how you, best affect that type of integration and how you can plan in a wider way. So I think there'll be some really good learning that we could potentially take on board there. And again, I did mention very briefly there the regional advisory group. And as I say, hopefully there is a wee bit more information which was in the pack, which people could refer to there. But we're hoping to use that group as an opportunity to look at that, wider learning, best practice, how we can maybe have a more integrated approach, how we can learn from different areas. So again, we'd be really keen to, to use that and to bring on board some of maybe of the, the information and the research and different reports that have been produced around how that can be done effectively. So be really keen to link into some of that, John, with yourself within council and others.
Thanks, Nicola. Thanks, John. I think that's for that's it now for questions. There's nobody else has their hand up. Nobody else here. As I say, Nicola, that was a really useful presentation, and I think our discussions have been good. It's great to have rural involved there now. This has an opportunity for a real co-design process. So with that in mind, and taking on board Jim's about time and meetings and all that, I think it's very important that we do have rural representation there, and I think it's important we have representation from the three DEA areas. So I'm going to ask now if we've got any nominations from Spern and Faughan. Caroline, is there?
I was going to say, can you nominate yourself? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's fine. I nominate myself. That's great. Delighted to be part of it. I've waited a long time for this.
I'll second you, Caroline. Linda here.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you.
Chair, I'll support that nomination. And the other advantage there is Caroline's on the board of RAPID, which we act as secretariat to the 3 DEAs. So I think that'll be a useful link. Yep. So thanks for that, Caroline. I didn't want to put your name forward because I know you can speak for yourself at all occasions.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. In terms of, can we nominate Kenny if he's absent? Can we nominate somebody in their absence, Martin?
Yeah, Caroline, I was going to follow your lead and nominate myself as well for the DERG DEA. And when people don't turn up for meetings, they get nominated. So I think we're going to nominate Kenny in his absence.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Martin.
Okay. If any of our statutory partners.
Bye.
I think that's Louise.
Louise Clark.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you just take a note of myself as the nominated representative from the Housing Executive? That might change depending on the different parts of the process in relation to our operational staff may become involved at different parts. So, but take my name at the start.
But I'm conscious that you may need to talk to some of the people within your respective organisations, and we're still open for nominations. But taking Nicola's point about the meeting being on the 28th, if you could look at your nominations and maybe get them into Rachel by next Wednesday, if that would be okay, that would give Rachel time to feed the information through to Nicola and get the papers and that out. Is that everybody then?
Hey, Martin, it's Seamus here. I'll be the nomination from the Western Trust.
Okay, Seamus, thank you.
Can I just say, I'll come back to Nicola once I speak to some members on our board too as well, in terms of maybe getting Philip or somebody like that to link in as well. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise, for me, I'll come back education input.
That's great, folks. As I said, I think this is a really important opportunity. I'm going to finish it there now, and I'm going to pass back to Pauline for the next two items. Thank you.
Of time, so we're going to move quickly now. Just first of all, to confirm, the next meeting is for the 21st of October at 10 a.m. Hopefully it should be in your diaries already, but just check that that's marked out in your diaries. And then just to move to AOB, just to check, has anybody got anything they want to raise? Yes, yourself, yes.
Erin McFeely, Developing Healthy Communities, and I just wanted to flag with the Strategic Growth Partnership that we've now got a save the date for the Healthy Cities Conference for the 30th of September, and we're really pleased to be running that in partnership with Ulster University. Some more details on that will be circulated to the partnership soon.
That's great, thank you, Erin. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else, AOB, but yeah. Yeah, sorry, Seamus.
Hi there, thanks. I've been asked to raise this by Karen Hargan, who's the Director for HR here in the Western Trust. And it's following a meeting that Karen had with the Northern Ireland Housing Executive and I think it was Karen McFarland from the Council earlier on this week, where they were exploring difficulties, particularly that we're seeing in the Trust around housing for students. And also as well too for finding accommodation for nurses and doctors after they leave the Trust accommodation. The Trust position is that these deficits are causing a risk to us attracting and retaining staff, and as such will probably be a risk to the work of the city dealing in the growth in student numbers as well too. We have become aware of a forum in the Belfast area called the Holy Lands Group, which is a multi-agency group, brings together many partners to look at ways to mitigate some of the things that we've talked about. And Karen has asked me to raise this with our community planner and planning group and our partners as an area of concern for ourselves. And number two, to see if we can get support from the community plan partnership to explore the formation of such a forum here in Derry as well too, where we can bring multiple partners together to support looking at more short-term and long-term initiatives for these issues that we're seeing. So and we do that without any kind of preemptions on where this will sit in governance and whether it's part of community plan or where it will sit. But I suppose just to raise it as an issue and they ask for community plan partners for us to explore replicating what's happening in Belfast and establishing a forum to help us overcome these issues.
Okay, thank you, Seamus. I think it's good you've raised that issue. I'll actually just, on my behalf, representing DFC, I'll raise that with some of my housing colleagues as well. I know there's people here from Housing Executive linked in as well, so we will follow that up as an action point. And John, just if John wants to come in.
Yeah, through you, Chair, just to support that suggestion, Seamus, obviously Council, as you said, have been involved in a number of conversations around this issue. And it is becoming an acute issue for the city and district. So we certainly as council are already involved in sort of bilateral, trilateral type discussions, but to have everybody together to discuss the totality of the issue, ranging from refugee accommodation, asylum seekers accommodation, university accommodation pressures, doctors and nurses pressures, and Indigenous pressures that we had previously been facing anyway, would be extremely useful, I think, Seamus. So thanks for raising that.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think there's anybody else now that has come forward. Oh, maybe one hand there I see. I'm not sure of the name.
It's Louise Clark.
Thank you, Louise, yes.
From the Housing Executive. Yeah, and thank you to Seamus for raising this issue. I actually attended the meeting with Karen and suggested it be raised today because it is going to take a multi-agency approach to this. And you're right about the extent of competition for accommodation, particularly within the city here from those different sources. The Housing Executive can do so much in terms of the social housing need and establishing social housing need. We've also done an analysis of need across other tenures, and there is significant pressure coming down the pipeline across the different tenures. So I think, yes, a group looking at this, a local group looking at this is critical. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Louise. And Malachi?
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. I just wanted to endorse what Aaron, Seamus and John had said in terms of student housing, and Louise also laterally. But my initial point was about Aaron in terms of the healthy city status, and I think it's just like to commend Aaron and her team on acquiring that status for the city and region, and look forward to closer collaboration from a university perspective in that regard, and delighted to co-host the event in September.
Okay, thank you, Malachi. All right, I think that's, oh, yes, we have one more.
Sorry.
You're okay?
Sorry, just 2 seconds, just on that issue. I'm representing the Outer West Neighbourhood Partnership, and just we work in the area in terms of the Northlands and the Glen and Rosemount, and there is issues and pressures there in terms of this issue, and we would be really, really interested in being part of that group if at all possible, just to say that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we'll note that indeed. Thank you. Okay, so we'll put that forward as an action point, something that we'll need to follow up with a number of different partners, and we'll certainly do that. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else coming forward, and I'm conscious of time as well, everyone. So we'll bring the meeting to a close here. I want to thank everybody for their time and for their important engagement, most of all. And we shall see you all again in October. Thank you.